Thank you all for joining. We're talking about today about taste, and as you see, the title is "In the Mouth of the Beholder," why we need to talk about taste differently. And for a lot of you, maybe this is not the most pressing issue right now in times of COVID, but actually we had this idea. I had this idea about this talk way before Corona, and I do still think we should be thinking about this even in these times. And maybe people who have had Corona know how dreadful it is if you cannot taste. As I was already introduced, my name is Jörn Gutowski. I'm a native of northern Germany, a small town where I grew up. And people from the north, you see an image there of an older man, are normally not the most outgoing and smiley people. I would say I'm outgoing and like to smile, and that's maybe why I decided to leave and moved to Boston, where I studied marketing and PR, and then moved on to working in a PR agency. And then I traveled the world, and as Goethe was already saying, this really affected me because I traveled a lot on different continents, and I stayed in many host families. You can see me here with a host family in Japan, and really food was always the connector. The first thing we did when we got into a new home with a host family was we sat down for a dinner, we sat down for a meal. And even if we couldn't communicate through language, there was a lot of communication through food. And I was always a curious eater even beforehand, but this really sparked my desire and my passion for food. And when I moved back to Germany and decided to settle in the great city of Berlin, I actually had an eye-opening experience. I wanted to buy a high-quality olive oil. So I decided to go into the biggest department store here called the KaDeWe in Berlin. And they have a huge delicatessen department. And I was standing in front of 60 different olive oils, and I had no idea which one to pick because I didn't know how can I decipher the labels, what tells me something about quality, and I didn't know what my personal taste preference is. I didn't know if I was looking for a nutty or a strong or a mild or a fruity olive oil. I had no idea. And in that moment, I had the realization, hey, hold on, I'm interested in foods and I don't know what to pick here with olive oil. And there's a lot of other categories, food categories. They also have variety, diversity, like coffee, like chocolate, like honey, and so on and so forth. And I was sure at that time, there's probably a company that helps people get to know quality and taste in different food categories. And when I was not successful in finding a company, I decided in 2013 to found Try Foods. And really what it's about, I'm basically putting together tasting sets. I have a little bit more than a dozen different categories right now, or boxes, like olive oil, like coffee, like gin, like salt, like pepper, and so on. And each set always consists of 5 different, in this case, olive oils, with a big taste difference from very mild to very intensive, from fruity to nutty, from herbal to spicy. So people can really actually have a tasting experience at home. And then also I write a booklet. I interview experts, but always my goal is to make this expert knowledge accessible to the regular consumer. So people have really essential and an informative experience at home about a food. And then obviously they can also buy each of the types in the set in regular sizes through my shop. But really this really sparked from food, really my passion for taste. And I'm doing these sets, but I'm also doing normally live tastings, sitting down with people, tasting together, having an interactive experience with them. Now in the time of Corona, I'm actually moved this into the virtual space. I'm actually doing a lot of online, a lot of virtual tasting with companies and groups, which is also a lot of fun actually. And then also in 2018, with 2 other people, I founded a second company called Sevi, but the product is Kofu. It's like Goethe said, it's the first chickpea, just 100% made of chickpeas, waters, just spices and salt, that's it. Kofu, organically made, and we're selling this right now in about 500 organic shops in Germany, Switzerland, and Austria. And this is also a great product, great tasting, and a product that makes a lot of sense in these times. But I want to talk about taste today. So what's the menu? What's on the menu? I want to first share a little bit, why is taste actually important? Why are we talking about it? Then telling you from my perspective, what is the status quo? How are we currently talking about taste? And then obviously my recommendations of how we ought to talk about taste and what we should think and do differently. So why is taste important? I think this picture says it all. A tasteful experience is something that is very powerful. This pleasure we can get from good taste is almost second to none. There's not a lot of other experiences that can be so sensual and so pleasureful for human beings. And who does not want to have this type of experience, right? I mean, you can even but put numbers behind it. Taste is the #1 reason for food buying decisions. You know, for companies, it's extremely important to find things that are tasteful. And this actually is from a survey in Germany, you know, the most competitive market, food market, probably in the world in terms of pricing. But even the Germans are looking, #1 food buying decision is taste. And the second thing, you know, in the Western world, people are looking for meaningful experiences to enrich their lives. And this is something, again, that taste can really offer, food can offer to people. That's also, I think, why food has moved so much more to just obviously something that fills us up, helps us to survive, to a status symbol. You know, food has become the new pop. Food is community. Food is so much these days. But how are we talking about food right now? What are the conversations right now? I think we as a society, and obviously also companies, customers and companies, are talking a lot about food, of how it's grown. So whether it's organic, whether it's regional, all these things are very important to both, you know, customers to look for products, and also for companies to communicate and think about the sourcing of the raw materials. And secondly, what's now very important now, EU is talking about a lot about, you know, the packaging, the labeling of products. People are wanting to understand what's in food products. They go away from additives. So this is something, how many calories are there? So this is what are we putting into the food, how it's processed. There's a lot of conversation, a lot of attention being paid to this part. And then last but not least, also part that's becoming very popular is the cooking part, with cooking shows, millions of recipes online, the chefs, you know, the celebrity chefs. So this is also something that we are very concerned about. But we don't talk so much about taste. So it's, you know, everything we talk about until the food is on our plate before it hits our mouth. But we don't talk so much about what's actually happening when food gets into our mouth. And I think this is a missing opportunity. And if we do talk about food, taste, I think, again, my experience is these three things symbolize, for me, mostly what we do when we talk about taste. So one is the expert talk. It's the sommelier that is in his own world, you know, talks about wet horsehair in the wine. It's a lingo, it's a language that not a lot of consumers understand, and that makes taste often come across a little snobby. The second part is the marketing talk. You know, companies use that to say, wow, this is the best tasting product ever, improved taste, new formula, most delicious. Those words, that the marketing phrases, but what is actually behind it? We're just throwing this at people. And then thirdly, is what I call the neglected talk. On this photo, you actually see a winery in South Africa that I personally visited, and it's stunning architecture, stunning interior design. It's beautiful. When I entered this room, I was really, really happy, or very, very impressed. But then I sat down and the tasting started, and just a waiter came and with 3 wines from the winery, and I ordered a red wine tasting, and he just poured the wines, said 3 things about each wine, and then left. And there was such a drawback then all of a sudden of that experience, where I thought, wow, this is really neglected. I mean, why are you not really talking more about taste? Why are you not paying attention to that a little bit more, and really making that experience, the tasting experience, just as great as the rest of the experience being at that winery? So what do we, so why are we not talking so much about taste sometimes? I think, yes, because taste is complex. It is a multi-sensual experience that is influenced by culture, psychology, personal background, obviously, physiology, so many things. So it's very complex. One of the most complex experiences, a sensual experience that we can have. And from a company point of view, it is difficult to put people into taste categories. There have been, wine shops, online shops that always have been trying it. I almost feel like it's been more a few years back where wine companies try to do that, sort people and also wine with categories. but it has not really come through that much. And I think it is because it's very complicated. And it is because also with that, it's difficult to find language that is generally understood, because bitter means something else to everyone. Fruity means something else to everyone or to different people. So it's all a very complex and difficult space and a very individual space. So that's why, because it's complex, a lot of people, when I do my tastings, I think they say, or actually often happens that they say, so I can taste. You know, they always think the sommelier, because he can describe things, he can taste. And people say, I can't taste. And I think this is, you know, people are lost. And I think we need to help people to become confident tasters and eaters. So I think we need a new approach. And I think the biggest thing, we have to shift the perspective. Right now, we're always coming from the product. You have experts describing a wine, describing a chocolate or coffee, and then talking to the customer about it. But we need to shift that around. We need to start with the consumer, the customer, not with the product. So we have to first help them and talk with them about a product and not to them. So instead of talking to customers, let's talk with them. And I'll tell you in a second a little bit more what I mean by that. But really, I think we have to empower people and really tell and help them to see, yes, I'm a taster. Obviously, there are people with diseases, physiological problems that are not able to taste, but everyone else is a taster. And I think this self-confidence is something that I think we need to instill in people. And I actually now want to do a little exercise with you. I think this helps maybe a little bit understanding more what I'm talking about. Take a look at this picture. It's a picture by a very famous German artist called Gerhard Richter. Look at that for a second, and and think about it. What do you associate? What are your associations when you look at this picture? Is it maybe this, pixels, computer pixels? Maybe you think about these old 80s, 90s computer games like Tetris. Maybe some of you think about this, it's a quilt. Or maybe some of you think about this, about a church window. And the question now here is, obviously, who is right? And maybe with art, a lot of people think and know there is no right or wrong. And this is the beauty of a good piece of art, is that it's open for interpretation. And the artist Gerhard Richter would never tell you it's just this or that. In arts, it's not done. Very interesting is too, because my first association with the picture was pixels, was computer. And it's very interesting because this picture, this painting was painted in 1976. So I don't think that he very much thought about computer pixels at that time. So it's very much, you see about how contextual understanding and interpretation is. And this is really what you can, combine and say this, the philosophical theory behind that is phenomenology. I don't know if you've heard about it, but basically phenomenology at the core is that the truth, when we talk about art now, the truth is not in the artwork itself, but in the eye of the beholder. So it's how we interpret it. Or you could also say the appearance of an object is not the object itself. So the appearance of the glass is not the glass itself, because the appearance always means it's how I view the glass. And how I view the glass is, again, very personal. It's also very contextual, because we are in the world. So depending on who we are with, this also influences our interpretation and also how the world appears to us. And this is very much understood and very common sense in the world of art these days. But I don't think in the world of food. So the question is obviously, what does this mean to food? I think the first thing is that for people who have anything to do with taste, who work in the context of taste, we have to start thinking about taste facilitation. Right now, most of the times, if people are, whether in wineries or breweries or anywhere where they interact with customers or do tastings in supermarkets, mostly we train people on the product knowledge, and maybe sales strategies if it comes in hand. But we don't talk about, I think, facilitation skills. How do we facilitate that? And I think this is something where we have to start. And the second thing I always think is when we are in situations where we have a tasting experience, I think what's more powerful is an experience for people and not just in an event. What is the difference? So if someone says, "Wow, there was a good event last night, great event," it means they had a lot of fun. It was, it was great. It was a great night of fun. But that's it. Good experiences then it's a good event. So I had a lot of fun. And I learned something. I was made aware of something. So something changed. I developed an understanding. And I think this is the more powerful piece than just an event. So experience, it's much more powerful than event. And I think that the goal with food also should be, as I mentioned, is we should enable and help people. We should give them tools that they can trust their taste. So I think if people start to trust their own taste buds, that taste more, they become more self-confident eaters. They will have more pleasurable food experiences. And also there are two very practical things that I think this can help with. Number one is less food waste. Why? Because right now, a lot of people just rely on the best before dates on foods. And they don't really trust their own senses of smelling, tasting foods to see if they're still good or if they're already bad. And I think if people are, really more in tune with their own taste, they can instead of just throwing it away, smell it, taste it, and then trust if it's good or bad. So I think this is really important for food waste, and I think also healthier eating habits. So I think these days, anyone who's in the dietary science, food science, come to the conclusion there is not such thing as one diet for whole population, but that our bodies are very individual. So diet that works for one does not necessarily mean it works for another person. So we all process foods differently. And what helps us to understand what our body needs is also a taste again. So very often, if we are more in tune with our taste also tells us what foods do I currently need? Do I need something more? Do I need sugars? Do I need carbohydrates? Do I need fibers? So we have a craving then for these products. We have a craving for the taste. And I think this again also helps us. And last but not least, I think taste helps us to seek out more high quality products at the end of the day as well. So I think this is, from a point of view of a taster, of people really, empowering them is something that is very, very important. Basically as the last slide is obviously now you all are probably, most of you are food practitioners, probably working for companies producing food, and a lot of them you might also work in selling foods and in the retail area. So what does my talk now actually mean to be put now a little bit more into practice? So maybe first with the producers. The thing that comes up first to my mind is a lot of producers these days have any type, some kind of visitor centers where people can come and interact with your brand, with the products. And I think how you make these visitor centers, how you set them up, how you build them, how you build tasting rooms, things like that is where you have to look at what I'm talk today. You have to not just talk to people there, not just to tell them this is how our products taste like, but interact with the customers there. Give them an experience that they find out about taste themselves. So again, tools and training for people who are there. You can either obviously train people, but you can also use technology so that people have more of an interactive experience, and that they leave the center with, I had an experience, not just an event. I had an experience. I learned something about maybe how taste develops in beer, in coffee. I better understand that now, and I better understand maybe also what type of coffee, what type of honey, what type of beer or wine do I personally like. So this is for the producers. And I think it also goes even further than just these visitor centers. I think it's also how we communicate on a larger scale with people. I think if we involve them more, if we interact with them, so it goes through different communications materials that you have through, social media, these things of talking with people, not to them, interacting with them. And another thing is, that's also very important. I think the area of retail. you see their little like setup. This is actually a mock-up of a tasting station that I developed for a big supermarket chain in Germany. And the idea there was, you probably know tasting stations, promotion tables in supermarkets. Normally it's very brand driven. You have a brand that offers, maybe they have new products, new soups, new cookies. You can go and try them. There's someone that tells you maybe about the ingredients. And then obviously it's trying to sell the product then. When people are trying that, they don't really learn much about it. Again, they don't really have an experience. So how can you do that in a retail? And my idea, for example, here was to say, okay, you have, instead of brand driven, it's more topic, category driven. So you have a tasting station that will always remain in the same spot, and you have ongoing topics and changing topics. So maybe one week, the topic is olive oil. And people have the opportunity there to taste different olive oils, to see what they like, and get some information about it. And you can have, people, but again, you can use technology, you can use video, you can use some kind of interactive games that people can interact and have an interactive experience. Also, I think something that I think could be very powerful, for example, for retail is, you have with wines, even sometimes with chocolates or olive oils or coffees, you often have in the aisles, you have a name, and then there might be 3 descriptors of the taste. So, this coffee is a fruity, acidic, fresh coffee, whatever. And this normally also comes, from some kind of expert that just says, okay, this is, what it tastes like. But I think it could be much more powerful if you have, like, for example, a tasting station where people can try it. And then you have your customers actually say what it tastes like. So you give them, again, you give them tools, you give them maybe 20 different attributes, aroma attributes for an olive oil, for a coffee, and they can pick the ones that they feel, well, this coffee is really goes into this aroma attribute. So then you use basically the crowd intelligence. You do that with hundreds of customers, and then you pick the 3 ones that were basically mentioned the most. So this is how you describe the taste of the product. So I think this is powerful. If then a customer comes back into the store, goes along the aisles to the olive oil and said, like, this is not, oh, I said that. So you have a much deeper relationship then with customers, and have them be part of the taste creation, or the taste description creation. So I think these are just examples, I think, of how you can change that. This, like I said, talking with the customer and have them involved, and have that give them a meaningful experience. And I think there's a lot of more ideas that both producers and also retailers can do to think about taste differently. So this is basically my little bit, hopefully, food for thought for all of you there. I hope there was something to look at taste a little differently. And now I'm happy to take any questions that you have.